Today I'm going to take a look at the recently released Linux Mint Debian Edition version 3, codename Cindy. Let's get started. So, Linux Mint Debian Edition. What exactly is Linux Mint Debian Edition? I mean, what is the goal of Linux Mint having a separate version of Linux Mint based on Debian rather than the standard Linux Mint that, of course, is Ubuntu based? Well, reading the release announcement over on the Linux Mint blog, they actually discuss in the very first paragraph what the point of Linux Mint Debian Edition is. I'll read briefly. Linux Mint Debian Edition is a Mint project, and it stands for Linux Mint Debian Edition. Its main goal is for the Linux Mint team to see how viable our distribution would be and how much work would be necessary if Ubuntu was ever to disappear. LMDE aims to be as similar as possible to Linux Mint, but without using Ubuntu. The package base is provided by Debian instead. Alright, so also the second paragraph is very important here. There are no point releases in LMDE other than bug fixes and security fixes. Debian-based packages stay the same. By the way, LMDE 3 Cindy is based on Debian 9 Debian Stretch. So that tells you a little bit. Again, this is basically, I won't say it's a testing ground, but you know, it's an alternative for the Linux Mint team. Again, if they ever, have to build their distribution without Ubuntu, they have something else to fall back on. They've already got a Debian edition that they've been creating anyway, so that's interesting. Not a lot of distributions do that, actually, like have two different distros based on different parent distros. The only other ones I can think of right offhand, Netrunner. They have their stable version based on Kubuntu, and then they have a rolling release version based on Manjaro. Other than Netrunner, that's about the only one that comes to mind that does something like that. Anyway, I'm going to read a little bit of the release notes here. System requirements. You need at least 1 gig of RAM, 2 gigs recommended for comfortable usage. Today I'm going to do this install in a VM. I'm going to give the VM 4 gigs of RAM. 2 gigs is recommended. You can get by with 1 gig, but this thing is going to use the Cinnamon desktop. The Cinnamon desktop's kind of heavy. 2 gigs is really probably what you need for minimum. 4 is better, so I'm going to give it 4 gigs. 15 gigs of disk space is required. 20 gigs is recommended. I'm glad I read that, because I usually only give my VMs 15 gigs of space. So I need to make sure I create a 20 gig VM just to make sure I have plenty of space. Resolution, we have a 64-bit ISO, 32-bit ISO. Okay, so both 64 and 32-bit images. That's a good thing. A lot of distributions are dropping 32-bit support, but at least for now, LMDE is available in a 32-bit image. We got a mirror list, and that's about it. So let me go ahead, pull down the ISO, and then I'm going to get started installing this inside VirtualBox. Alright, so I'm going to again, install this inside VirtualBox. Go ahead. Let the VM capture my keyboard and mouse. Alright, so we're booting into our live environment, hopefully. The ISO I downloaded, by the way, the ISO for LMDE 3 was 1.6 gigs in size, so kind of a big ISO. That's probably why they recommend having at least 20 gigs of disk space. There's going to be a lot to this image, so a lot of software probably installed by default. And we're still waiting. Booting off the ISO is the same as booting off a live USB stick or a live DVD, so sometimes it takes a while to get into the live environment. And let's see if the live image has the guest editions, the VirtualBox guest editions installed. It doesn't look like it because it didn't resize itself, but that's fine. This resolution is not bad for what I'm going to do. I'm going to quickly run through the installer. Kind of curious what installer they're using, whether they're using the Ubiquity installer, the standard Ubuntu installer, which is also what Linux Mint's main edition does, or if they're using another installer. It looks like they're going to use something different, though, for the Debian edition. Alright, language, English has been chosen, so I'm going to click forward. We need to choose our time zone. It's already chosen America, Chicago for me, the central time zone in the US, which is correct. So all I need to do is click forward. Keyboard layout, English US has been chosen for me. That's correct. Click forward. Right, we need to type our name. I'm just going to call myself DT. Our username, DT is fine for my username. I need to create a strong and complicated password for the user DT. Alright, do I want to log in automatically or be required for my password to log in? I like being required to enter a password to log in for privacy reasons. Alright, hostname, I'm just going to leave that blank. I'll let the installer pick whatever hostname it wants for me. No, it says please provide a hostname. I guess I have to pick one. A lot of distros will just automatically create one. I'll call the hostname DT-PC. And click forward. No partition table was found on the hard drive. Do you want the installer to create a set of partitions for you? Yeah. I like automatic partitioning. I also want to see exactly what it's going to do with the automatic partitioning. It looks like it's going to create a swap partition that is the same size as the amount of RAM I gave this VM. I gave this VM 4 gigs of RAM. It's going to create a 4 gig swap partition. And then it's going to give the remainder of the space to an extended 4 partition. That's fine. I'm going to click forward. And I believe that is standard, and the standard way Debian handles automatic partitioning, if I'm not mistaken. It always creates a swap partition the same size as your RAM. Alright, do we want to install Grub? Yes, we do. The only time you wouldn't maybe want to install a bootloader is if, you were on a multi-boot machine, but for most of us, we're going to need the Grub bootloader installed. Where do we want to install it? Yeah, /dev/SDA is fine. Click forward. Alright, summary. All this looks good. I'm going to click install. And the installation begins. That installation was not bad. That's not the Ubiquity installer. I'm not sure what this is, but it's pretty intuitive, pretty easy installer. Now I'm going to pause the video for a few minutes. This portion of the install usually takes somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes on most Linux distros. And the installation has completed. As always, when you install a new operating system, you need to reboot the machine to finish the installation. That's what I'm going to do right now. Alright, and the machine has rebooted. VirtualBox wants to capture my keyboard and mouse again. And let's see how long our freshly installed Linux Mint Debian Edition 3, Cindy, takes to boot up. Alright, boot up time was very quick. So we got some VirtualBox guest editions installed. Let me log in. See if we get a proper screen resolution. If not, I may take a couple of minutes to install the guest editions. Alright. Yeah, it doesn't look like the guest editions are working out of the box, so let me take a couple of seconds here, and I'm going to try to get this installed. And for those of you that will be checking out LMDE 3 and VirtualBox, to install the guest editions, I went to the top menu here, Devices, click Insert Guest Edition CD, and then basically a run dialog asks you for your root password, because to install software you always have to give a root password. And this window here comes up and it's building the guest editions. I'm not sure how long this is going to take. I'll pause the video while it builds the guest editions. Alright, the guest editions took about a minute to build, and then you reboot the machine, and voila, we've got a proper screen resolution. Now I've got 1920 by 1080 screen resolution, which is the resolution for this monitor that I'm recording. Alright, and of course, very similar to Linux Mint's standard Ubuntu-based edition, you get the Linux Mint greeter on startup. By the way, this is going to use the Cinnamon desktop, which is really the flagship desktop environment for Linux Mint on both the Ubuntu-based distribution and, of course, the Linux Mint Debian Edition that we're taking a look at today. So, welcome to your new operating system, yada, 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 yada. Yeah, you can read this if you want. You can read documentation. You've got first steps here. First steps include system snapshots. The first thing you need to do is set up automatic system snapshots. So, this is taking snapshots of your system, snapshots and restores in case, you want some kind of backup utility. If we click launch here, it's running Timeshift. I'm not going to give my root password because I'm not actually going to take a snapshot on this VM, but it's using Timeshift. Alright, multimedia codecs. those things can be kind of a pain to install, especially on Debian. If you want to, you can click launch and hopefully something comes up to install those multimedia codecs for us. Yeah, very cool. So this will get you your third-party multimedia codecs needed for, playing a lot of audio and video. Right, then we have the update manager. I'm not sure if there's going to be any updates, but I can click launch. All right, do we want to install? Well, it's still trying to install the codec, so let me finish that first. And then we've got the update manager that came up. I'll close that for now while we're installing the codecs. Got my coffee here today. It's very important to have coffee for these Linux installations. Some of them you better have an entire pot of coffee prepared for. Linux Mint is not one of those. I probably need a cup and a half. Alright. It's actually taking a little bit of time to install those third-party codecs. You know what? I probably should have just canceled this and not done it on camera. I won't need these codecs for anything I'm doing in this VM. I will mention that although I'm recording this in a VM because it makes recording, especially the installation, a lot easier doing this in a VM, one of my laptops behind me, the ThinkPad that I recently purchased, it runs Linux Mint 19, the standard Linux Mint 19 with the Cinnamon desktop, and it runs great on that laptop. I may go ahead and wipe that out and install Linux Mint Debian Edition Cinnamon on that laptop to see how it compares on physical hardware. Anyway, so the multimedia codecs, I won't run the updates because I don't want to wait for it. System settings, you could launch that from here. This should bring up, our control panel. Yeah, all your system preferences. Software manager, launch that. This should be some kind of graphical software manager. It's generating a cache. One moment. So probably has to go out and sync the repos, and then really nice graphical package manager or software center. Included in this is a lot of third-party proprietary applications such as Spotify, Sublime. These are not free and open source software Dropbox, so that's really cool. Anyway, if you wanted to install something using their graphical software center, you just search for anything. For example, I don't know if HTOP is already installed on the system, but it's a program I install on all my installations. If I searched for HTOP, there it is. I click on it, and it gives you some information, a screenshot, user reviews. If I click the install button, it will go ahead and install that for me. I may have to enter a root password. Anytime you install or remove software or make any kind of changes to your system, you're always going to be asked for a root password. And just like that, HTOP is installed. Alright, and I went ahead and installed HTOP because I may actually look at HTOP later. I really wish every Linux distribution just installed HTOP by default. Many of them do, some don't. We have links to documentation also in the Linux Mint help screen here. Of course, we've got links to help, web forums, the IRC chat channel. If I click launch, what happens? HexChat opens up and it takes you to the Linux Mint support IRC chat channel. Very nice. I really like when distributions take the time to make that happen. It really makes getting support quick if they already have that IRC client ready to go and pointed to the right chat room. And then we have a little tab here for contributing. If I launch that, probably going to open up a web browser. Probably tells me how to contribute to the project financially or contributing with code, whatnot, if I wanted to get involved with Linux Mint. And that is exactly what this page does. While I have the web browser open, I'm assuming this is going to be the default web browser on the distro here. It's Firefox 60.1. This is Firefox 60.1 ESR, the extended support release. So, alright. Let me say, do I want to save and quit? No, just quit. I don't need to save anything. Also, the welcome screen, once I've looked at it that very first time, for me, I don't ever need to come back to this welcome screen. So I like to go down here and tick this off where it says show dialog at startup. Tick that off, and you never have to look at that again. If you want to get back to that down the road. It is in your menu, in the Cinnamon menu down here, so I can find that help screen if I want it, but I don't want that thing to, launch on startup every time I log in. So, and while I've got the menu open, let's go through what is installed by default on LMDE 3. Should be quite a lot. Again, that ISO was not a small ISO, 1.6 gigs, and they recommended 20 gigs of disk space, so should be a lot of programs installed by default. We have our archive manager. Let's see what archive manager they're using here. Let's see, about archive manager. Okay, that's going to be file roller. That's GNOME's archive manager. So using one of the GNOME applications. There are probably a lot of GNOME applications here. Cinnamon is typically uses a lot of GNOME apps. Originally, Cinnamon was basically GNOME 3 with a bunch of extensions before the Linux Mint team basically made Cinnamon into its own desktop. A little bit of history on Cinnamon. Anyway, we have calculator. It's going to be, your standard GNOME calculator, I'm sure. Accessories, we have the character map, GNOME's character map. We have GNOME disks. We have the document viewer. We have files. Files is the Nautilus file manager, the standard file manager. No, excuse me, I misspoke. This is Nemo. Nemo 3.8.5. I wonder why they call it files. That's confusing because GNOME calls their file manager Nautilus files in the menu. If I had both Nautilus and Nemo on the same system, that would be very confusing because both of them would be named files. I really wish these desktop environments, these creators of desktop environments, the devs, would quit naming their programs such generic names, because that tells me nothing. Having a program and calling it files tells me, it doesn't tell me what the program is, really doesn't tell me anything about the program. I mean, it doesn't even tell me it's a file manager. I mean, it could be a file search utility, right? We have our font viewer. We have hot corners, managing the hot corner settings. Of course, HTOP, I installed that. That wasn't here by default. We have image viewer. Man, we have a ton of stuff under this accessories category. We are in accessories, aren't we? Yes. All right, input, keyboard, language, so, some settings. We have the entire LibreOffice suite. I'm not sure why that's under accessories. That really needs to be in the Office category. We have Base, Calc, Draw, Impress, Math, and Writer. We have a login window. We have Media Player. Is Media Player really an accessory? This really seems like it's the entire suite of applications on the system, even though I'm pretty sure I clicked accessories. That's weird. It's kind of a bug. When I clicked accessories again, half that stuff went away. But I am in a VM, so, take that for what it is. That's really probably just me being in a VM. Cinnamon does not play nice in VirtualBox sometimes. Again, I've got the ISO downloaded. I'm going to go ahead and burn it to a USB stick and install it on one of my laptops. Check it out on physical hardware, and I might get back to you guys on that once I run it for a few days on physical hardware. I know Big Daddy Linux Live, that particular show, they do that every Saturday night, and this week, everybody on that show is trying out LMDE 3 and reporting back on it. And if I happen to join those guys this Saturday night on Big Daddy's show, then I, of course, will share my thoughts on LMDE 3. All right, also under accessories, we have Redshift. Redshift is a color temperature adjustment tool. If I launch it, I think it just adds an icon down here in the sys tray. It does. And a little info about Redshift. It says enabled. It gives us the color temperature, period, daytime. Redshift adjusts the color temperature of the screen. Basically, it's supposed to help with your sleep patterns and it's supposed to have some health benefits to using Redshift. At least that is the story behind Redshift. That's what the Redshift devs say. I have no doubt that that's true, though. I don't normally install Redshift on my systems, but maybe I should. I have a screenshot utility. We have text editor, which in Cinnamon, what text editor are they using? Zed? Yeah, they're using Zed 1.8.3, a small and lightweight plain text editor. Also under accessories, well, I cannot get this menu to work quite right. I know I picked accessories, but it's still showing me things I know are not in the accessories category. Alright, now it's working again. Tomboy Notes is a note-taking application. And then we have our USB writer, our USB formatter, and the virtual keyboard. which is an on-screen keyboard. I don't want to turn that all on in the VM here. All right, graphics. We have GNU Image Manipulation Program. That's the GIMP. So, one of the best programs we have in free and open source software, with one of the worst names for a free and open source software application. GIMP is a horrible name. Why did you name your application GIMP? Anyway, GIMP 2.8.18. Fantastic. GIMP is what I use to create all the artwork on this channel, you know, like the banners, you know, for my YouTube channel and all the thumbnails and everything. I'm not much of an artist, but I can get around in GIMP a little bit. Also under graphics, we have Pix and Simple Scan. All right, under Internet, we've already taken a look at our default web browser, Firefox. HexChat, we've also taken a look at. That's the IRC chat client. Thunderbird is our email client. Transmission is GNOME's BitTorrent client. I'm not going to agree to anything there, but Transmission's the fine BitTorrent client. Under Office, we've already seen that the entire LibreOffice suite is here. Under Sound and Video, we have Media Player. That's a very generic name, Media Player. Very likely it's a GNOME app. So if I go to Help here in the menu, nothing opens up. What's going on here? Not sure what's going on there, but I'm sure it's GNOME's Media Player. A little glitchy there. Rhythmbox is also here, the standard music player for the GNOME desktop environment. Rhythmbox is a fantastic music player. A very nice program. Alright, also under Sound and Video we have VLC. VLC is a multimedia player, in particular a really nice video player, handles pretty much every video format known to man. Installing all those multimedia codecs really helps with programs like VLC too. So VLC should just run anything for you once you install those third-party codecs. We have a universal access category, which only has the onboard, on-screen keyboard. And administration, this is where, some of your preferences and settings are going to be. So we have our backup tool, which again should be Time Shift. No, this is a different application. Or is it? Let's see. If I do a backup now of my personal data, forward. I'm not sure what program this is. Anyway, I just successfully made a backup, though. So it's really an easy tool there. I didn't really choose a directory or anything to back up. That's why it was so fast. Depending on, what you're backing up, that could take quite a long time. I don't want to do that on camera, but it is great that they have a couple of different backup utilities. Yeah, because they have Time Shift down here, so this one is a different utility. So you have backup tool and Time Shift. We have our disk usage analyzer. We have HTOP. HTOP again. I installed HTOP. I will open it though because I installed it because I wanted to take a look at system resources. Now Cinnamon, I can tell you, does not play nice in a VM, so this may not be a fair representation of the Cinnamon desktop, but Cinnamon is pretty heavy even on physical hardware. So CPU, pretty normal, 2-3%. That's normal. I'm not doing really anything. Memory. That's actually pretty light for the Cinnamon desktop. 703 megs of the 4 gigs of RAM that I gave this VM. So that's actually not bad. 700 megs, I actually expected that number to be a little higher. So that's pretty good. Under administration, we also have, a lot of system settings, power stats, print settings, the software manager again, the Synaptic package manager. So on Debian and Debian-based distros, the Synaptic Package Manager is probably your best graphical package manager. Very easy tool to use. Just search for a package you want to install. So say instead of Firefox, I wanted to run Chromium. And there's a good chance Chromium's not going to come up here. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yep, Chromium. There it is. So I can mark it for installation. I can choose mark. I can go up here, click apply, and if I click apply, it's going to install Chromium. I don't want to take the time to install Chromium, but that is how you would use the Synaptic Package Manager. I install Synaptic on every single Debian or Debian-based distro that I install. If you want a GUI package manager, that's the one you want. System monitor, this will be, of course, GNOME system monitor. We've already taken a look at system resource usage. It's a little higher, actually, here than in HTOP. See, RAM was 703 in HTOP. It's 920 in the GNOME system monitor. Some of that may actually be the GNOME system monitor using a little bit of RAM, and CPU. CPU is higher. Yeah, it's weird that you get a little bit of a difference depending on the tool you use. And that's pretty normal. Whatever tools you're using for monitoring your system, they're all going to read a little differently. So, and we have our terminal. See what terminal they're using here in the Cinnamon desktop. They're using the GNOME terminal. The GNOME terminal is a very nice terminal. Alright, also under administration, we have the update manager again. Anyway, under preferences, I won't go over this. Preferences are all your preferences. So if you go to your system settings, there's all your preferences. Basically, everything you see there, you would probably find under preferences here. Accessibility, account details, yeah, all that's right here. And then places, this is basically file manager bookmarks, you know, for your bookmarks in the Nemo file manager. So you got documents, you click on that. It should take us to the documents directory inside the Nemo file manager, and it does. By the way, I have a backups folder in documents. That is where I did that backup utility, and it put the backup right here. It created a tar file. Okay. Anyway, pretty neat. Let me go down here. There's a quick launcher here for the GNOME terminal. Let me do a quick uname -r. And the kernel is a really old kernel, 4.9.0. Why is the kernel that old? Again, LMDE is based on Debian 9. Debian 9 is old. Debian 9 stretch is using the 4.9 kernel, so that is what LMDE is using. So, alright, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to right click on the desktop. I want to see what kind of wallpapers we have. This default wallpaper right here, I'm not sure what's going on with that. Do you guys see how bright yellow that is? It's to the point you can't even see the Linux Mint logo. I'm not sure what is the deal with that wallpaper. So that makes a lot more sense, that one there. And that one's not bad. I actually really like that. If you want something really minimal and classy, you know, black and white, that is really sharp. Now, if you're going to use a really dark wallpaper like that, I would probably use a lighter theme for the panel in your windows. Well, the windows have a light silver theme, but I would want the panel probably silver too, just for some contrast. But, yeah, pretty nice wallpapers. And this one here, yeah, that's really nice. But you know what? That's probably the best one out of the bunch for me, in my opinion. If I want to play around with the themes, let's see. If I go to the system settings again, I bet you they have themes in here. They do. So we have this themes application. I'm going to open up the files. Again, files, of course, is Nemo. And if we want to play around with the theming, I could choose, you know, different icons. Instead of Mint Y, I could choose Mint X Aqua. Change to blue icons instead of green. And for some of the window bordering, I could choose Mint Dark. Yeah. Of course, if I go Mint Dark here, I probably need to go Mint Dark for the buttons as well. Oh yes, that's really nice. But again, the dark theme, I probably want a lighter wallpaper. Let's go back to the light theme. So how about Mint Y? Mint Y. Yeah. And since the wallpaper has a little green in it, let's go back to the green icons. I think that's more appropriate. We could, of course, change the panel theme. So if I wanted a lighter panel, which I kind of do on this, let's try this one on for size. That's not too bad. I could live with that. What else do we have? We got something a little more silvery. That one was more like a beige color. Yes, that one right there I think would work for me. No, it's very similar, isn't it? You know what? I'm going to leave it for now. I don't want to spend too much time playing with wallpapers and themes. You guys know I could do that all day. Anyway, that was a very just kind of quick installation and first look of Linux Mint Debian Edition version 3. Cindy, what are my thoughts on LMDE 3? Yeah, it's great. It is very much Linux Mint. It is very much the Cinnamon desktop with a lot of the Linux Mint tools you've come to know and love. You know, it's obviously the packages on it are going to be a bit older, right? Because it's based on Debian 9. It's not based on Ubuntu 18.04, which, you know, has much fresher packages. But again, this is kind of a side project for the Linux Mint team. You know, they like to not put all their eggs in one basket. You know, they got this Debian Edition, you know, on the side just in case they ever decide they want to get off basing their distro on Ubuntu. Or, I mean, who's to say Ubuntu's going to be around forever, right? We've had thousands of distros come and go, right? That get started and eventually die. Ubuntu, eventually going to be one of those that probably dies. I mean, nothing lasts forever, right? And the Mint team, you know, again, they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. So they've got the Ubuntu-based edition, the main edition, and of course now they have the Linux Mint Debian edition. And I, for one, think it's pretty nice. If you want something rock solid stable, it's hard to get something more stable than Debian stable, which is what they're basing off of. So overall, I give this thing an A. Before I go, this show here was made possible by Ansem, Carlos, David, Leor, and Rob. Those guys are the producers of the show. They're the reason this show is possible. This show is also brought to you by the ladies and gentlemen. You see their names on the screen. These are my patrons. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting the channel. You will find me over on Patreon. Look for DistroTube at Patreon. Peace, guys.